Awesome. Welcome again, everyone, to Metagov seminar. Today is, at least for me, Wednesday, February 18th, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is the normal slot for our Metagov seminars, which are weekly research presentations. And we invite governance researchers from around the world to come and share their work with us. And today we have a community member, Othman, here, who's we're very excited to host and have share about his research into what he calls the governance memory system. I'll let him introduce himself now and his work, but thank you all for being here. It'll be about a 20-minute presentation, 20 to 30-minute presentation, followed by a Q&A that I will help facilitate. And yeah, if you have questions that pop up during the presentation, feel free to type them in the chat, and then we'll move through them after Othman's presentation. And welcome everyone who has joined. We're about to kickstart, and I'll pass it to Othman.
All right, thank you, Val. I appreciate the intro. Hello, everyone. My name is Othman Gbadamassi. I am the founder of OCC Research, and today I will be presenting to you the governance memory system. A little bit about me. I did undergrad at Penn State with a degree in information sciences and technology. And for the past 5+ years or so, I have been operating at the validator and infrastructure level within the blockchain crypto space. Done a lot of research, governance, and business development, especially at the validator level. And the governance memory system is essentially an amalgamation of all the lessons I've learned throughout that time there. And I've witnessed decentralized governance in various contexts and throughout different ecosystems such as Sui, Solana, Cosmos, Polygon, so on and so forth. Um, but yeah, I will get into things and tell you what this is about. So, a wise man once told me that governance is like a fire extinguisher. So when I say it's like a fire extinguisher, oftentimes a fire extinguisher is overlooked, and if it's not in your frame of reference, you don't necessarily care about it. But once a fire ignites, you hope that the fire extinguisher is easy to access, easy to use, and works as intended. Now, I compare this to governance because oftentimes governance within the decentralized ecosystems is the first to get deprioritized and overlooked. But when a contentious proposal passes, key stakeholders of the ecosystem hope that the governance structure has the capacity to represent them and their values appropriately. They hope that governance is easy to engage with for all contributors, and they hope that the governance processes are easy to understand. And throughout this presentation, I'm going to be introducing the governance memory system, which I'll be referring to as GMS. And this is a form of preventative governance designed to build institutional resilience before a crisis ignites. So, oftentimes throughout my experience, I feel that these ecosystems are very reactionary when it comes to governance, and this is a proactive system of governance. So the core issue that the governance memory resolves is governance amnesia and the concept of institutional memory. So a lot of systems that appear functional, are actually slowly deprecating and losing their capacity to learn and evolve. And you start to see this through different indicators such as procedural fatigue, legitimacy fractures, and informal power concentration. Oh, and redundant decision making over time. And oftentimes, these are some insights that I've collected throughout my research on the governance memory system. The paper that inspired this presentation was written around May of 2025, and I saw that governance amnesia often is seen because surface level metrics that assess governance landscapes in decentralized contexts often hide deeper dysfunction. And you see this through the loss of knowledge. So, again, within these decentralized contexts, contributors consistently rotate in and out, and this institutional memory is often lost. Um, I myself have witnessed a lot of uninformed voting, especially when it comes to validator-based ecosystems, not just solely delegator-focused ecosystems. And this is because node operators often see voting as exceeding their scope of responsibility, and running nodes is quite technical and attention heavy. So adding researching context and how to vote puts a lot on the operator's plates, and validators tend to vote with their friends or just vote with the masses, disregarding context. Some of these decentralized ecosystems lack accountability structures, and GMS is also supposed to surface hidden and overt influences that control the protocol over time. Now, what is GMS exactly? It's a five-layer framework designed to transform governance from a series of isolated votes into a system of cumulative institutional knowledge. So we are taking proposals, discussions, on-chain data, and off-chain sentiment, packaging that up and analyzing it and providing communities with actionable insights, more evidence for better decisions, and in turn, they build their institutional memory. So by making the historical context accessible and actionable, GMS enables protocols to learn from their own history, but also others' history to avoid repeating the same mistakes. Again, this is a system for preventative health rather than reactionary governance health. And I'm going to lightly highlight the five layers of the system, and I'll get into them in more detail throughout the presentation. But they're all built on top of each other and provide a comprehensive view of governance, health, and history. So at the base layer, we have proposal lifecycle metadata. And these are structured records of authorship, rationale, discussion, and context. More mature ecosystems understand the importance of this, but this can be taken a step further in most instances. At the layer two, we have outcome review anchors, and these are scheduled checkpoints for evaluating whether decisions have achieved intended results. Now, this is also understood by more mature governance ecosystems, but this can be done in a more consistent and structured manner. And then at the next layer, we have informal power mapping, and these are analytics surfacing hidden influence. Throughout my research behind the solution, I interviewed Professor Ellie Rennie, who is also a part of Metagov, and a project she is on within Metagov is called KOI. It stands for Knowledge Organizational Infrastructure, I believe. And this is a project that I think can help leverage certain aspects of GMS, such as IPM. Then we have a governance health index, which is a qualitative diagnostic scoring system across five dimensions to assess the strength and resilience of a project's meta governance. And then last and most importantly are the recurring themes and friction. So this is the synthesis of persistent governance tensions within different protocols. Now, we're going to start with layer one, proposal lifecycle metadata. And the problem that it solves is that proposals are usually treated as standalone events. And oftentimes, when a proposer proposes a proposal and a vote concludes, they continue to push their agenda. But throughout this process, a lot of critical context is lost. There's not often persistent trace of authorship, intent, evolution, or precedent. And PLM solves this by embedding structured metadata into every stage of a proposal's journey, transforming these one-off votes into a cumulative queryable governance memory. And I've identified six metadata fields that I feel are crucial in this layer. First, we have author credibility. So this is not just who is pushing the proposal, but what role do they have in the community? What past proposals have they pushed? What does their off-chain reputation look like? Then we have the why, which is the rationale. And then we have the categories of the proposals. So whether it be technical, financial, or meta governance based. And then we have the evolution of the proposal. So what does the edit history look like from the draft to when it's on chain? Is this proposal an amendment? Has the vote passed or failed? And then we have discussion venues. So these are links to forum threads, the Discord, Slack, Telegram, X, and from my understanding, KOI, the Knowledge Organizational Infrastructure Project, its strength comes from being explicitly focused on informal governance interactions. And there's interest in how the informal governance interactions that don't necessarily feel like governance tend to steer organizations. And they've also developed a reference ID system that could provide stable references to off-chain discussions that my PLM layer can link to specific proposals. And then lastly, we have the implementation status of proposals. This is whether the proposal has been fully implemented, partially implemented, or abandoned. Then we have the next three layers of the outcome review anchors. Um, Layer two is the next three layers of the GMS. So layer two is outcome review anchors, three is informal power mapping, and four is the GHI. So in regards to the outcome review anchors, these are structured checkpoints, and they are based on if it is event based or periodic, and it essentially evaluates if the decision achieved its intended result, and it assesses if a proposal should be reversed, amended, or iterated upon. Again, you assess, did the proposal solve a targeted problem and did it introduce new risks? Because oftentimes when proposals pass, sometimes there are unintended consequences. Then we have layer three, informal power mapping. This again surfaces different power dynamics within the ecosystem, and knowing that the KOI system indexes messages, blog posts, images, videos, web pages, and builds relationship graphs showing who replies to who and whose messages get reactions. This is exactly the kind of data that the IPM layer needs to answer who really calls the shots. And within these ecosystems, are decisions being shaped by technical gatekeeping, private collusion, or weaponized precedent? Throughout my research, I did some interviewing, and some people have mentioned they've entered hostile Discord environments where if they're not the most technical engineers, their feedback essentially gets rejected and ridiculed. So these are things that informal power mapping services. And then next we have the governance health index. This assesses the meta governance across five different criteria, which is inclusiveness, transparency, feedback, accountability, and the coordination infrastructure. And this criteria is derived from the first principles of crypto and open source software development. The key questions it essentially helps us answer is if the participation is meaningful or performative, and are there things that we're at risk of, like contributor burnout. Then we have the most important layer of GMS, the synthesis engine, RTF, recurring themes and frictions. And it essentially zooms out and identifies the systemic governance patterns by analyzing all the data from the previous layers of GMS. And it transforms this governance history into actionable, queryable insights. Some critical key questions answered are, what issues keep coming up cycle after cycle. And when I say cycle after cycle, I mean from the draft being made all the way to the last outcome review. Why haven't these frictions been resolved if they haven't been resolved? And are old conflicts being reframed with new narratives? This is also an issue I've witnessed in more mature governance ecosystems. Now, for the next part of the presentation, I'm going to walk you through three case studies. Two of them I apply GMS retroactively, and then one of them is a current pilot I am launching within the near ecosystem. So first, we have the Juno protocol. This is a chain within the Cosmos ecosystem, and I'll break down the situation. Essentially, there was Proposal 16, which confiscated $130 million worth of Juno from a suspected Sybil attacker. And this Sybil attacker was accused of gaming the airdrop. The Sybil attacker, unbeknownst to the larger community at first, was a Japanese syndicate that was responsible for custodying the funds of multiple entities. And this proposal was very contentious. It passed narrowly, and it led to a lot of internal conflict, developer exits, price crash, and threats of legal action. And overall, an existential crisis and a crisis of legitimacy within the Juno protocol. If GMS was implemented from the jump, it could have surfaced a few things. For example, there was a PLM failure. The authorship of Proposal 16 was attributed to Core 1, which created a false sense of consensus and incited a lot of panic throughout the general community. For those of you that are unfamiliar, Core 1 is essentially the core developers of the team of the project, but this proposal was only pushed by one core developer who actually didn't consult the other core developers, but it gave them some standing as being associated with the entire core team. And because there were no feedback loops, the downstream consequences of pushing this proposal and accepting it were not anticipated, and the actual severity of the precedent that this proposal set was not properly assessed. Then we have the concept of the noisy minority. And the noisy minority is essentially when a small group or singular person make a lot of noise and essentially hijack the narrative, skewing the actual nuanced viewpoints of the larger community. And IPM would have surfaced that because a lot of this was emotionally driven. Um, there was focus on influencers on Twitter and private chats, and it started to veer away from an evidence-based process of assessing the risks of the actual proposal to an emotional focused one. And then last but not least, again, the recurring themes and frictions blind spot. So funny enough, a similar chain within the Cosmos ecosystem called Osmosis ran an airdrop based off of that snapshot that Juno used. And their airdrop went smoothly, but due to the lack of cross-protocol learning and institutional memory that these different chains could have shared, this was not necessarily considered. And this whole debacle essentially led to the collapse of the entire protocol. At the end of the day, this was panic-based decision making in a system with no constitutional anchors, no precedent for conflict resolution, and no institutional memory. And I interviewed one of the co-founders of Juno, and he mentioned that if their governance had foundational values or some sort of guidelines, this proposal itself wouldn't have even been proposed. Next, we have a case that I actually wasn't a part of. Meanwhile, I witnessed the Juno situation. I studied this through a few talks from through Gitcoin, and this essentially talks about their governance evolution. And Essentially, it was a slow decline from optimistic hyperstructure to a lights on rubber stamping mode. A lot of the delegates tuned out, contributors got burned out, and participation became more performative and eventually collapsed to a smaller group of delegates that kind of just passed the proposals and some would say collected a check. I would like to highlight focus on the steward health cards, which was an initiative that they passed once they started to continue to iterate on their governance processes to help the wider community figure out where they would share which delegates they would share their votes with. Unfortunately, they measured the quality of stewards by their voting frequency and not essentially the quality. And the outcome review anchors from GMS would help the community focus on the actual impact of the outcomes. And the steward health cards was just a step in the direction of these complex frameworks and over-architected governance that some more mature protocols tend to lean into that start making something that we call governance debt. And it doesn't necessarily assess if the community has the capacity to implement these structures. Now, GHI would have scored the readiness and flagged the attention fragmentation that was witnessed throughout the community over time. Now we have near protocol. So currently I'm trying to pilot GMS within near. It's the perfect time because near is navigating a complex transition post near digital collective collapse. Now, what the near digital collective was, it was a an attempt to formalize their governance process about 2 years ago. Apparently, it was very catastrophic and blew up. There were accusations of corruption from different contributors and a lot of, contention surrounding the whole thing. Eventually, it never really fully actualized, and 2 years later, they are attempting to formalize their whole governance system again through something they call the House of Stake. This is when I came into the near community at the beginning of this transition, and I witnessed that their governance is under stress from multiple angles. First and foremost, they had a contentious inflation vote before the actual governance voting infrastructure was fully built out. A lot of the members of the community were frustrated with the price action of Near, especially since currently they have been generating some buzz through their Near intents, but investors and contributors haven't seen that kickback through the price action. Therefore, they felt like it was long overdue and they needed to halve the inflation. Although, when you look at the tooling that they used, you see that everyone that voted on this proposal didn't have enough stake and it failed quorum. But nonetheless, the proposal was pushed as an upgrade because how things were voted on were through validator upgrades. And this is something that is prevalent in different ecosystems that don't have a governance infrastructure, voting infrastructure, and tooling completely built out. But what you fail to realize is the underlying influences, such as when validators don't agree to upgrade, then they get kicked off the network and then they lose out on their revenue and their livelihood. So even though quorum failed, the proposal still passed. Validators voted it through. The the votes on the tooling was essentially disregarded, and this raised procedural legitimacy questions. Then we have the use of veneer incentives, and veneer is their vote escrow token, their vote escrow governance token. And if you guys are familiar with vote escrow tokens, it brings a lot of arguments throughout the governance ecosystem because some feel that it's not that effective, more accurate. And I found that it risks attracting mercenary participation and ossifying control. I'm already seeing some members that could benefit from veneer incentives also not wanting to participate or not wanting to be delegates, but because they're there early, they might control more of the influence in the protocol. And then we have some builder paradox throughout the ecosystem that I have identified throughout my interviews with different builders. Um, I see that they're frustrated because they want to focus on building their products and their dApps, but they feel like they need to participate in governance to protect what they're building, and it feels like some sort of distraction. Now, in general, this near situation is a classic example of what GMS is supposed to make legible. As you can see, it's just not one singular problem, but a web of interconnected issues involving procedural ambiguity, informal power, incentive misalignment, and lack of institutional memory. And the institutional trauma that they've got from the near digital collective collapse would have been important to understand. Yes, they do have some postmortems, but there are a lot of details and knowledge that have rotated out with contributors that have left the ecosystem. And there are several he said, she said arguments in regards to corruption that could have been appropriately tracked if they had implemented a system such as GMS. A GMS would have provided the shared context necessary for the community to navigate these challenges without repeating the past mistakes again. Just a little bit of insight of where I'm at with the pilot. I have formally proposed the proposal on the forum. I haven't put it on chain yet, but essentially would implement the PLM layer within Near, and this aligns with their one of their founding documents called the Mission, Vision, and Values. It hits their transparency and accountability, data-informed decision making, iteration, adaptation, and feedback loops. Um, Currently, I've received some positive community engagement, and the head of governance has tagged the product strategy team to consider this. Currently, it's not the main priority for the ecosystem, though, because they need to ratify several founding documents, such as the mission, vision, values, and the Constitution, and they need to transfer custody of the treasury from the Near Foundation to the House of Stake. Now, what are the actual inputs and impact I'm hoping to provide through GMS? Um, We have some structured data sets that further research can build upon, open sourcing tooling for replicating AI-based governance analysis, because that is something that we are trending towards, and then a research report of my findings. But ideally, with this near pilot, I could create a governance intelligence page, but one that focuses on all the layers of GMS that new and old contributors can interact with consistently and refer to. And then in regards to the broader ecosystem impact, this enables more evidence-informed governance, less vibe-based governance, which is something that is often seen. And then it lowers the barrier to institutional memory. Again, like I said, having this accessible and not gated in certain community calls and deep and lost in several forums scattered all over the place and basically in one central location can help a lot. And then this becomes a foundation for governance agents as we increasingly go towards an agentic future. This provides clean data for AI agents to interface with. I know Near is big on implementing and using AI to augment their governance, so this is a step in the right direction. Now, this is a big idea. So ideally, I'd like to start within the blockchain ecosystem because that's where my expertise lies. I've seen different forms of governance over the past 5+ years, and I see the same mistakes happening. A lot of this is preventable. And I'm starting GMS within the blockchain crypto ecosystem because a lot of the data is easily accessible. There's a lower barrier to entry, and that's where my expertise lies. But ideally, this framework can be retrofitted and applied in other decentralized decision-making aspects, helping either mutual aid funds, housing co-ops, and maybe even eventually going up to civic tech, because at the end of the day, it's building some form of institutional memory, making it accessible and um, actionable for different participants. Some limitations that I have for the current process is that I don't have predictive models for governance capture. The GHI and IPM are relatively subjective. You need to understand a community's culture and missions and vision to calibrate the index appropriately. There are some incentive gaps. Currently, I'm a one-man team, so stewarding that memory, um, ideally would be incentivized for, different contributors to contribute to. And then attention economy modeling. Attention is a finite resource and an important resource, especially within governance. Um, but GMS doesn't track read rates and on the forum and whatnot to get a better picture of that. Um, but yes, ideally, if anybody would like to collaborate, I'm hoping to help build the next generation of governance infrastructure, um, to help ecosystems and community learn from their past and prevent them from making repeated mistakes over and over again. Um, Again, I'm Othman Gbadamassi from OCC Research. You can reach me at occresearch6@gmail.com, or find me on Twitter or at Othman Gbad or on the Metagov Slack. But yeah, I'm open to questions, comments, and concerns.
Woo.
Awesome. Othman, maybe I would love to see the slide that has the 5 layers. If you want to leave that up maybe for the Q
Yes, for
part.
sure, for sure.
Just because, yeah, you have developed such a helpful language. But it's a new language. So it'd be helpful to be able to kind of start to try to use it as we um ask questions. But cool. So thank you so much. That was very rich and I'm very excited. Steve, you had your hand up and are first in the stack. So Steve, take it away. Oh, is Steve still here? Where'd he go? Hey. Okay, maybe Steve left or something happened. Hopefully he's all
Dang.
right and he'll be back.
Only one person left, so it must have been Steve.
Yeah.
He had it up very early. Maybe he was saying, maybe it was impatience because he had.
I think he'll be back. Knowing Steve, he'll be back. All right. Any other questions? Pat, come and go for it.
Hold on. I had a lot. I just left them in line in the notes. You kind of addressed it at the end, but I was really interested in. I'm curious how you think it fit. One, sorry, this was awesome. Like I think I need time to process all of it, but I was really Uh, it felt like it was informed a lot by crypto stuff, which is often quite developed because the stakes are high, but I could see how pieces of it could start in a more informal civic tech community, which I'm involved in a weekly community that meets in person, about 100 people. So I'm thinking about that. The thing is, yeah, so the question about attention economies at the end, I was thinking earlier on, like I'm increasingly unable to tell like it used to be if someone spent a lot of time researching someone and you met and you had all this, it meant you had invested time and so you could react to that as if this person cares, they invested possibly a significant fraction of their day before encountering me investing and sorry, that's a very egotistical way to say it, but just it applies to everything. Like you can't tell how much someone cares. Like I want to know the thing that I can't tell from the writing and output anymore, which is like what fraction of your precious resource of time did you spend on the thing that I'm reading or that the thought that I'm hearing or the flattery that I'm feeling. And I can't gauge that anymore in a way like the flattery I'm feeling like that. Oh, you took the time. That doesn't mean anything anymore. So I'm curious how that does that fit any place? Like I know it's really hard to gather that data. It's like honor system, but like does where do you see that fitting into like your the framework?
Okay, so if I'm understanding your question, you're trying to understand where the time and effort to understand like someone's attention to different issues
Yeah, it's like the
is.
quality of the output. Like someone can have a bunch of like agents trained that like create high quality participation or contribution or something, a document, and it might like the content itself matters to me, but also like the skin in the game that the person has who is advocate. Like it's like kind of I don't know anymore, and I think I'm curious
Mm,
how that fits here. Like we're all the only scarce resource that we have in common now is time, and it's becoming asymmetrically like evident how much time people spend on things.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I think the way I haven't super fully delved into the attention aspect of things, just because this is very, new,
And there's
but
so much, like, I feel like I don't, yeah, it's so developed. That I hit the only raw edge is like,
yeah,
not,
no, for sure. This is good though, because I've been like mulling with some things, and what I've been trying to assess is where like how can you see there's been a lack of attention. So for example, in this context, it would be all right. Something that I've noticed in terms of proposals is whenever there's an economic focused proposal, that's when you get more of a diversity of voting. So say if you're in a, this is just hypothetical, say you're in a more mature project and you through the categorization of the proposal, you're like, okay, this is an economic proposal based off of all the proposals that we have based on like, that are categorized under economic, the voting distribution usually looks like this. But over time, we're seeing that the voting distribution is starting to consolidate. Now, when it's starting to consolidate, um, is this just an indicator of maturity of the protocol and more cohesion, or is this showing
huh.
or is just showing a lack of actual consideration and attention to the proposal? So you would, at least my way to defer that would be surfacing some of that off-chain sentiment, and um is there still unsatisfactory feelings throughout the community, and that'll be witnessed through either informal power mapping or how people feel about different outcome review anchors. So, are these proposals successful, or are they failing and introducing more risk? And are these failed proposals also tying up with the consolidating voting clusters? Did that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's all new territory. That makes like, yeah, it gives me new things to think about. Um,
Yeah, so I would essentially try and corroborate the voting clustering with the success of the most recent proposals within a specific category.
yeah. Yeah. And I think the thought that originally raised this was the talk of metadata traveling with, and it made me think of when we were starting a worker cooperative, we were told it was very important to track sweat equity, even though we're only going to get paid back pennies on the dollar, maybe at some point, almost as a fairness thing, to have it
Hmm.
legible. And now it was a similar sort of like, as you were talking about the provenance of these things going through, I was like, I want to know how much attention someone has put on this that I can't see
Hmm.
through the outputs anymore. Um, just to, but not to totally reopen the question. I'll pass to someone else. Yeah, thanks, Othman.
For sure. But we can, if you want to, chat more about it, we can definitely, chat more about it later.
Cool. Yeah, thank you.
Hmm.
Any other questions folks have?
I wanted to apologize for being late. I was at a dentist appointment that didn't go very well and was there a little bit longer. So, but I'm going to watch the rest of what you put together here in the recording. Thank you very much for putting that together. You may have covered this issue already, but my question is about forgetting. So you're trying to preserve memory, but there's also the issue of sometimes we have redundant information or we have information that's not really information that we want to hold around, not just because it's expensive to store it, but also because it can be distracting as we try to search through the memory. Do you have a strategy for managing memory, forgetting, keeping it concise?
I'm actually very happy that you asked that question because I mentioned I wrote the paper behind this presentation around May 2025. I've been editing it actually recently in the past 2 weeks, and that's something that I haven't really fully developed in regards to forgetting because I started to understand that there are some things that you want to forget, or maybe not necessarily forget, but reduce in regards of like the importance of it when surfacing these recurring themes and frictions. But ideally, um, the the way I would want the recurring themes and frictions to essentially signify the importance of either the lessons learned or whatnot, or information surfaced within these ecosystems is more in relation to like different ecosystems. So for example, I don't know if you saw my Juno osmosis example. If you see a similar issue happening in other ecosystems, that would probably that would probably raise the importance or surface the weight of that connection a lot more rather than, one-off scenarios. But yeah, I think the importance would be based off of the cross-protocol learning initially, and hope like ideally through the data collected, it would be categorized in a more efficient manner to separate these things. Um, but yeah, that's a whole realm that I realize I'm going to have to do some exploration on as well. And I hope
Thank you.
you feel better from your dentist
Yeah.
appointment.
Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
question, Chris, and thank you for joining us. Yeah, I see Michael has a hand. I just wanted to sneak in a quick comment, which I wrote in chat, but it's like super interesting to think about. Almost like this is a very comprehensive, like futuristic feeling system. And with Metagov, we're about to launch a speculative fiction contest. Actually, we'll be hosting a contest, and you all should feel excited and inspired to maybe submit some fiction, whether you're a seasoned fiction author or new to the genre. I have just been in this world of like um, thinking about dreaming up and bringing to life some of the like exact like presentations like these that really inspire me and might feel like far away from where we currently are, possible, right? Like better than what we have, closer to what we want. And so, yeah, that was just kind of not a question, but just a thought that I'm definitely going to be watching this back, Othman. And if you write fiction or if anyone else here feels inspired to like write fiction based off of this system. I feel like there's really cool, interesting things to explore around like what a system like this would capture, what it would help with, and also maybe like ways that all of this like nuanced data collection might create like other like weird new interesting patterns, rituals. I don't know, hiccups within a community. So, yeah, just throwing that out there.
Nah, yeah, I definitely appreciate that. There's a whole privacy aspect to this that I haven't jumped into, just for the sake of time. But yeah, I'll definitely consider your comments. I see Michael also. I mean, I see Michael raised his hand.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm not as familiar with like the DAO space. I'm more coming from like groups working together, more in real time. But um, I think sometimes like implementing governance can be really useful, but sometimes people are used to working in like informal ways and want to focus on the work they're doing. And so I think that it can be sometimes difficult to implement or like bring in these a lot more like deliberate or intentional structures. And I think when you mentioned like the work with Near, like how they were interested, but they were like, oh, we can't prioritize this right now because we're doing this transition and these other things. And so yeah, I'm just kind of curious like what your thoughts are on like how you think that we can implement these types of governance ideas that can be really helpful, but that require people to like kind of be willing to be more deliberate. Does that
Hmm.
make sense?
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I think something that a lot of governance geeks definitely get caught up in sometimes is, you know, over complicating things, and like you said, in certain aspects, informal ways of working are the best solutions. Um, and this is all built on top of each other, but ideally, each layer can kind of be used on its own in in different ecosystems. Like if you want to, you can pull a governance health index audit on your thing just to assess, oh, these are the weak points we have. This is where we lie in regards to governance maturity. We're more of an ad hoc system rather than a fully optimized system. So these are the weak points, and this is probably what we want to improve. And you can, leave the other instances. This entire framework isn't supposed to increase governance debt, but is also supposed to evolve as the ecosystem evolves. And additionally, it is it's supposed to evolve as the ecosystem evolves, and then it is also wait, I lost my last point. Um, dang, wait, I lost.
Are you
I was
talking about
kind of.
those like different layers that can be used like separately?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. So they can be used separately, but when I conceived this idea, um, it made sense to me to put this all together, and it seemed like it would be most effective if this was just kind of a system you started off with, which is why I felt like jumping into Near was best case scenario, because once people kind of get into their rhythm of this is the way things work, it's kind of hard to implement a whole, the whole 5 layer thing into it. Um, and if like within the previous Near instance, there's still some issues that they have from that previous governance blow up. Now they're still arguing about things in the past in their recent transition, and it's plaguing that process a little bit. But it's hard for newer contributors to understand, like, I don't even know if this guy is telling the truth. So having that memory, especially, based off of what Chris said, and like eventually like surfacing the ones that are important and then forgetting the ones that aren't important, could save a lot of back and forth, because now you're just witnessing more dysfunction, but there's no real action you can take to mitigate this dysfunction besides, hey, these are the moderation rules we have, but we're not exactly sure. Like, hey, this person may have a valid point that this contributor might not have the best interest in mind for the direction of the project. Um, but yeah, this is supposed to be modular. Ideally, best case scenario, you start off building your your team and your ecosystem while implementing this step by step. Because ideally, like since they all build off of each other, the more data you have, the better your recurring themes and frictions will be. But yeah, I hope that answered your question. If you have a follow-up, let me know.
Yeah, thank you, dude.
Awesome. See, PatCon has another.
I just
Yeah.
realized, so I'll pass back to Val.
Well, we can kickstart the thread, the follow-up thread in the Metagov seminar channel with PatCon, your next question. And thank you for taking collective notes. We'll bring those into the Slack as well. I've been, yeah, in that doc, and I'm very grateful that you often whip up a collective notes doc. So thank you, PatCon, for that. And thank you, Othman, for this amazing presentation. If everyone could please come off mute and let's give our speaker a round of applause off mute or just send some claps in 3, 2, 1.
Thank
Yeah.
you for having me, all. I
Eric,
really
claps are
appreciate it.
so strange, but so important.
Yay, cool. And yes, we'll continue discussion. Othman's in our Slack, so we'll kick off the thread. If anyone has other questions that come up, we can keep it going over there. But super inspiring, very exciting. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Othman, for sharing with us.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate your time, everyone.
Cool. Have a great rest of your day, y'all. See you next week. Bye
See you
bye.
next
Talk
week.
about
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.